the area he was dropped in was this place that was known as a dumping ground. People would just go dump their rubbish on this little side track of road, which is just, kind of adds another layer of sadness to the story.
That's yet another heartbreaking detail of this whole thing.
He was just kind of dumped unceremoniously. And yes, he was, wrapped in a shroud and all of that stuff. But yeah, it's pretty creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mary would have been 12 when it happened, and she recounted the story, and apparently it took her 3 hours to tell it. And she said she had quirky little details. Quirky is not the right word, but she had details like the boy had thrown up after eating some baked beans, and her mother was enraged with the mess, so she threw the boy into a bathtub and beat him, which would have accounted for why some of his appendages were
pruned up,
super wet.
Yeah,
and others weren't, and that she said that she'd only ever heard the boy utter any noises, and it was one shriek at his death. So yeah, it's a pretty rough story. I don't want to go too into detail. The whole problem that they have with this story is that Mary has a history of mental illness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not very reliable.
She's not very reliable, although her psychiatrists believe that she's sincere. They've interviewed her hundreds of times, and her story's never changed, which is pretty rare for somebody who's making a story up with mental disabilities like hers. So,
but there's been many cases of folks who have an illness like that, a mental illness, who convince themselves of it, and they're very sincere and they believe it. And it might be that in some way she's got, savant is the wrong word, but she's able to just make something up and memorize that exactly. I'm not discounting her version of what it could be, but if you try to explain it away, we've seen a lot of evidence in the world of folks who are in that state.
Yeah.
And
additionally, they went back to her old neighborhood and tried to interview her neighbors, and they all said, no, there was never a boy here. Which, on the one hand...
Well, they might have kept him under wraps.
If you buy a kid to beat on, right, you're not going to be walking him around the neighborhood.
So why...
Probably keep him in the closet or the basement or something.
So why did she choose that particular time to come forward? Had her mother finally died?
Her parents had died a long time ago.
So she had a dad also living in the house?
Yeah, so I'm not totally sure what that whole situation is. It's disturbing if it's true, for sure.
Yeah. Well, there's people that do that kind of stuff. Really.
There are. That's true.
Did anybody ask Mary what happened after the boy died? In terms of what happened to her? Did she become the punching bag then? Or did they go find another kid to punch on?
No, they don't talk about that, at least in any of the stories.
Really?
But I would assume, she was 12 when they purchased the kid, so I would assume that either she had already been the punching bag and was continued to be the punching bag, or they found another outlet. If it was never Mary, then it was never Mary. If it was always Mary, it was always Mary. But she may have needed a supplement. That's just such a weird, creepy little...
Yeah.
So there are two other theories. One, which I think is fairly plausible, is that perhaps this boy was a child of an Amish family.
What?
There are a lot of Amish in Pennsylvania, right?
True.
Pennsylvania Dutch. And so they're more prone to cover things up. Additionally, they don't really have contact with the outside world.
They don't trust the English.
There were pictures, being circulated. They probably wouldn't have made it into these Amish communities. So if anybody in these communities knew this boy, they wouldn't be able to report it. But, that's pretty much as far as that goes. He was in ill health and an accident happened. But I just don't think that the kind of bruising that he had.
Well, and this is something that I never noticed, and I don't want to harp on this too long, but I do want to ask, the bruising, were they able to tell, was it all at once or was it continual?
Well, all of the bruises they found, they were really, really deep bruises, and all of the bruises they found on his body, when they found his body, were new. Okay. Or at the same time.
So no old bruises then?
No.
Huh? No broken bones?
No.
Just out of curiosity, do you know if the Amish circumcise their boys?
They do not. They reject circumcision, like a lot of other Christian faiths.
So, okay, that kind of lets out the Amish theory.
Yeah, and I guess I don't think of the Amish as having the most advanced medicinal technology, so I don't know that the kind of scarring that he had. I don't know.
I wouldn't agree with that, because if you think about it, if your entire life, let's say, all you do is you work with the livestock.
Yeah.
And when something happens, you learn to sew them up so that you can keep your livestock alive. Well, if you've been doing that in your entire life, you're probably, there may be one guy that's got an aptitude for it. So everybody takes their stock to him. He would get really good at it.
That's true.
And having sharp scalpels is probably not against their religion.
No. And they're not like Jehovah's Witnesses. They do allow blood transfusions and stuff. So the ankle thing is legit, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe he was.
I mean, I hadn't
he
heard
wasn't
this,
because they don't circumcise.
But yeah, no, I mean, we're off topic here, but it's just that's very interesting. And
So the last theory. So I like this theory a lot. A man by the name of Frank Bender. He's part of the VDOC Society, which has taken a keen interest in this case.
And the VDOC is what exactly?
They're a society.
It's a bunch of retired police officers and detectives and they've gone into a lot of cases, and they've got a lot of coverage in the past, as they open up old cold cases and look at them with modern techniques and technologies and try and come at them from a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool.
So he thinks that this boy was probably raised as a girl.
That explains the cutting the hair.
Mm-hmm. And the nails, too, because a girl would usually have longer nails.
Mm-hmm.
But that nobody could recognize the pictures of this boy because he was walking around town as a girl.
That's true.
Right? With very long, blonde, brown hair.
Or longer hair, yeah.
Longer nails, dressed as a girl. They would, when the accident occurred or whatever occurred, chop off all the hair really short, trim the nails, make it look like this kid has always been a boy.
Mm-hmm.
They're touting, nobody except for the people who knew what happened know that this boy is a boy. Everybody else thinks this boy is a girl. I think it's fairly valid.
Yeah, that explains why the kid was found naked, too, because they probably didn't have any boys' clothes to dress him in.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't thought about that.
Clothes, yeah.
So one of the things that Bender brings up is that apparently the medical examiner, and this wasn't widely publicized, but the medical examiner said that it looked like the boy's eyebrows had been plucked. Like you would if you were trying to pass a little boy off as a little girl.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh.
They have some sketches of what this boy would have looked like as a girl.
Yeah, now that you mention it, and I hadn't really made the connection. When you look at the sketch and the photo, they're very similar, and it would be very easy with long hair to mix it up and just go, well, it's a little girl.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think it's a really good theory, actually. When this happened in 2003 or something like that, and they still haven't solved the case. Nobody's come forward, but there's still a really big effort. And Bender has an 85% clearance rate with this society in solving unsolved cases. Mm-hmm. So maybe he's on the right track.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just got to check with all the psychiatrists in the area who were practicing at that time.
The sad thing is that at that time, it was not uncommon for a family to have a child and not be able to take care of it because they just didn't have the money for it.
Hell yeah.
So you were sent to Uncle Jim's farm to live with him because he had enough money and you were going to be raised there and taken care of there. And so it could very easily have been that the situation was, somebody who did this said, oh, well, I sent the kid to Uncle Jim's farm, or the kid was sent to Uncle Jim, who then committed this atrocity. I mean, this doesn't play into any of the theories you've talked about, but it just kind of things that you have to think about when you remember the time frame.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. It's hard to imagine somebody who just couldn't afford to raise a child killing them so brutally. Mm-hmm. There are definitely
other ways to do it.
Get rid of these, fun topics for the night, fun ways to get rid of people. But you don't beat a child to death with deep, deep bruises just because you can't afford.
Normal people don't.
Well, normal people don't. But, I think that I generally lump people who are concerned about the welfare of their family into normal people.
Yes, very true.
Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. So, yeah.
Once again, I'm going on record. I don't like the story. This one's a creepy, gross story.
Not nice.
I don't like it either.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm sorry, everyone.
Yeah.
Sorry for haunting your nightmares forever. Just get to picture all of these wonderful, beautiful things.
The way to start the holidays.
Yeah, think happy thoughts.
Yes.
So I'm guessing it's like some girl from Philadelphia or somewhere around there just who's pregnant out of wedlock. And at some point when she was going to start showing, she decided to, head to some relative's place or somewhere where she could have, maybe a home for wayward mothers, that kind of thing, wayward mothers, and have the baby. She was probably a little bit of a head case and had convinced herself that she was going to have a daughter, or for some reason believed she was going to have a daughter. So she told everybody she was going to adopt her niece and bring her back to live with her because her niece needed a home and her parents had been killed or whatever. And when she comes back several months later, well, she's got a little boy and not a niece. Because, well, turns out the baby wasn't a girl after all. She screwed up. And so she had to hide the fact that this kid was a boy and not a girl.
That makes sense.
But then why is the kid dead?
It could be a number of things. It could be just the burden of keeping this secret and just being a single mother, etc. Got to be a bit too much. It might be that at some point she came to realize that keeping the secret forever was just not going to be possible.
Or if she's mentally unbalanced.
Or
then
mentally, she's mentally ill. Yeah, there's always that too.
Unfortunately, things happen.
Yeah.
I mean, either way, I don't know. There's not enough facts in this one for me to ever say, I think it's this.
Unfortunately for me, I think it probably is Mary's story. I think she's got a lot of facts right. And,
but did she have
almost
anything?
all of them were things that, the general public knew, but her story is pretty convincing.
But nothing, she didn't have any details that hadn't already been put in the papers, right?
No, but I guess why would you make something like that up? It's not like she's earning money from it. She's not getting any kind of public notoriety.
A lot of people do that kind of stuff, though. Tons of people confess to murders they haven't committed just because they like the attention. So it's, entirely
I don't know.
possible.
So I don't really know what the whole situation is.
I have to admit, Mary's story is plausible.
Yeah.
It runs in line with your theory. I mean, there's a lot of, crossover between what you were looking at and what you were talking about and her story. But I don't know.
I don't like it.
No, can we be
Sorry.
done with it?
Yeah.
Well, so anyway, we still have to solve this mystery. Okay, forget it. Now, let's take a break.
I think it's too sad to solve. I think that we just have to say that it was actually just a Halloween dummy that everybody thought was a real boy.
Well, there you go.
And
like
unfortunately, that's
Pinocchio.
what the cops thought when they first got there, was that it was a dummy.
Yeah.
That's the worst part.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Nope, it was his Pinocchio.
It's
This is just
Pinocchio.
Pinocchio.
Yeah.
everyone.
This whole thing was actually Pinocchio.
Yeah,
Okay, I feel
just the
better.
ventriloquist
Thank you.
dummy.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
And lovely unicorns running in the field.
Yes.
Oh, sad
I
as
see them now.
sad as it
Yeah.
is, it's like kids get beaten to death every year, even today. It's like they usually don't wind up in a junkyard, and never identified. But it happens all the time. Too bad.
Unfortunately, it does.
Yeah.
So this is an open case. It's ongoing. Ostensibly, if you know something about it, you've talked to the authorities. But if you want to talk to us instead,
Yeah, you should
send us
talk to
an
us.
email at thinkingsidewayspodcast@gmail.com. All of the links from this week's show, as well as pictures, will be up on our website at thinkingsidewayspodcast.com. You can listen to our show there. You can also listen to it on iTunes and Stitcher. If you're listening to it on iTunes and Stitcher, please leave us a rating and a comment.
Yeah, we love to hear from folks.
We'd like to hear from people. And recently we decided that we would hop on the social media trend. So we've got a Facebook now.
That's right, Sam. We've been posting lots of pictures of our breakfast and our lattes and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Instagram. Yeah. We don't have Instagram yet.
No.
We might in the future. Yeah, there's not much practical application for that. Anyways, you can find us on Facebook. We're Thinking Sideways Podcast. You probably don't need the URL. Just search for Thinking Sideways Podcast, and there we are. So thanks.
All right, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Well, see you next time.
Think happy thoughts. Thinking Sideways is not supported by Cracked.com. Instead, it's supported by the generous donations of our listeners on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/thinkingsideways to learn more. And thanks.
Thinking Sideways.
I don't
understand.
Does not compute.
You never know.
Insufficient data to formulate a slide.
What?
Stories of things we simply don't know the answer to.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of Thinking Sideways. I'm Joe, joined as always by
Devin
and
Steve.
And this week we're going to talk about another cool mystery. This is, of course, the last of our summer series where we talk about mysteries that are kind of crappy. Not really. Actually, this is actually a pretty good little mystery, but it's a little bit thin. We are going to debate it a little bit, and we might have a few insights for you. Who knows? Okay, what we're talking about this week is the disappearance of Brandon Swanson. He was a resident of Marshall, Minnesota, disappeared in 2008. I first came across the mystery in crack.com. It was an article about phone call mysteries. And I really can't top their introduction, which is great. So I'm going to quote it here. In 2008, 19-year-old college student Brandon Swanson was driving home after a night out when he crashed into a ditch on a gravel road in middle of fucking nowhere, Minnesota. He knew as well as us that this was a classic horror movie setup. So he called his parents and asked for a ride, unquote. Thanks, crack.com. I really appreciate the heads up on this mystery.
You're the best.
Yeah, they are. They actually come up with some really good stuff. I love Cracked. I should also give a shout out to Dustin and Diana, who suggested this as well.
Everybody
and
did.
I think a lot of other people have too.
We just sometimes stop
After two or three?
Yeah.
The list of names is actually bigger than the description of the mystery.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and there's only so much room in the spreadsheet, right? Yeah, and so all the rest.
Turns out
of you,
there is a finite number of rows and columns that you can have on a spreadsheet.
Yeah, this is a very popular mystery. I talked to a local Minnesota reporter about this last week, and she said her third and fourth most clicked on articles are articles about Brandon Swanson.
I believe it.
And she says it's really strange too because she says it'll go along and nothing will happen, and all of a sudden just the clicks just shoot up. Bam. And I just said,
Flurry of activity.
Well,
I can tell you what happens.
I know what happened is that Generation Y or maybe Reddit or somebody posted something about it, and then bam, your clicks are going to go way the hell up.
It's always Reddit.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
Like ours.
Yeah,
you promised to link to one of our articles for her, did you?
actually, I did. I said, and she actually wants me to let her know when it's going to go up.
Oh, okay.
And she said she might even do another article about it.
There you go.
So who knows? I mean, yeah. I mean.
All right, so let's talk about Brandon.
Let's talk about Brandon. Not enough about us. As the song says, I'm going back to the start. Brandon was 19 when he disappeared. He lived with his parents and his sister in Marshall, Minnesota, and he had just finished his first year of college. He was celebrating with some friends in the tiny town of Lind, which is about 6 miles southwest of Marshall, Minnesota. He left Lind around 10 to 10:30 to go to the town of Canby, which is somewhat north of there, for another party. So just briefly, if you're near a computer and a browser, get into Google Maps and find Marshall, Minnesota, and then zoom out a little bit, and you'll see that Marshall is connected to the town of Canby by State Highway 68. It's about...
Straight line.
Yeah, pretty much straight line. Yeah, it's to the northwest. And so if you can see the town, if you can see the towns of Canby and Marshall and Lind, then that gives you a great geographic reference for this whole thing. And if you're not near a computer, well, go look it up as soon as
when you get one. Yeah.
But it's really helpful to be able to see this.
It is.
Because this is a bit of a geographic mystery. As I said, Brandon hung out at the party at Canby for a bit, and he left around midnight or maybe 12:30. Nobody's entirely sure exactly when he left. The date was Wednesday, May 14th, 2008. At that party, he had a shot of whiskey, and he'd also had been drinking a bit at the party in Lind.
But he wasn't like he was blind drunk or anything.
No, nobody reported that he was smashed. Although, of course, on the other hand, if he was smashed, everybody would be saying, oh, no, it wasn't, because nobody wants to be liable.
It's true.
So who knows? But I should mention, though, that Brandon, as far as I know, had no substance abuse issues. He had no mental issues. He was a normal, well-adjusted kid, as far as I know.
19
Yeah, exactly. So I have no evidence that he was smashed. When Brandon left Canby to go home to Marshall, he had a straight shot down Highway 68. You guys
Like we talked about.
Yeah, but he didn't do that. He took the back roads. I'm assuming that he did that to avoid the police because he had been drinking.
Yeah, that's really the only reason that you would do that.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
I've done it a time or two when I lived in kind of rural areas, and that was the only reason that I went on those back roads.
Oh, yeah,
and
me
I
too.
regretted it because it's easy to get lost.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And hindsight is 20/20, but he really should have taken the highway.
He should.
Yeah. I mean, well, if you're looking at Google, you can see the back roads that I'm talking about. And this is the countryside in this area is flat farmland, and it's divided into sections. And it's sections
1 mile grids, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's squares that are 1 mile on a side, and all the roads pretty much go on those section lines.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a grid.
Yeah. And we should mention, on your phone, it's probably not going to show up.
Yeah.
This whole area.
Oh, zooming out to see the towns?
Yeah, you're not going to be
you
able
don't
to
have a
see
big
it
enough
all.
screen.
Yeah.
No.
Just as a mention.
Yeah, but if you get on kind of a big screen, you can see it quite well. And so Brandon, when he left Canby, we don't know exactly what route he took. He could have gone due east 9 miles, and then he could have turned right and gone due south 6.5 miles.
Or he could have gone in a stair-step fashion of some kind.
Exactly. He could have taken an infinite number, well, maybe not infinite, but there's a whole lot of possibilities there. But he wound up essentially going south for 6.5 miles, and then he made a right turn and went west for 1 mile on a dirt road that went across the middle of one of these sections. And then he tried to turn left onto the Lyon-Lincoln County Road, left being south. But he screwed up. He turned it just a little bit too soon and drove into the ditch. And
it seems like that would be pretty easy to do. Because his car wasn't, new, was it?
No.
So, if you have the dimmer headlights and there's definitely not street lights out there,
yeah.
So it's going to be dark, and I've driven out in that kind of country, and I think we all have. It's hard to judge where that dirt is road and where it's ditch.
And, if he made the mistake of trying to be covert and drive with just his low beams on instead of his high beams, or even if his high beams were, I've had the cars where the high beams are
still bad.
Still terrible compared to every other car around.
Oh, yeah. Well, you don't know, too. Again, he was taking the back roads. He actually, taking this route that he took, was actually going the opposite direction from where his objective was, which was Marshall.
Yeah.
And he might have had his lights off. He might have actually maybe a pair of headlights showed up in his rearview mirror. He decided to, take off down this dirt road and turn his lights off.
Oh,
and that's
just
possible.
in case?
That's entirely possible.
God, that's really paranoid.
That is paranoid, yeah. And, again, Brandon would have been well served. He actually would have been much, much better off to have been pulled over by law enforcement and arrested for Dewey.
Yeah, if indeed he was that intoxicated.
Yeah, I don't even know if he was that smashed. But
so he
makes
his
possible.
turn.
So he makes his turn, gets stuck in the ditch, and he pulls out his cell phone.
And what time was this?
This was 1:15 a.m. on the 14th of May.
Mm-hmm.
He started calling his friends, and nobody was picking up.